Thank you, Roger. Thank you, everyone. Really good to be here and to represent the UK government and give a slightly more local view to Brent's wonderful global view. I can't promise to respond to all of Roger's comments about UK government policy, but I certainly agree that storage is a priority. So I'm going to set out a little bit today why the figures back that up, why it's such a good thing, not just for climate, but for electricity bills, and I'm going to also summarise a publication that government published in December called the Clean Power 2030 Action Plan, which sets out very ambitious target to get to clean power in Great Britain by 2030, and that's part of one of the 5 government missions, so it's really up there as a key government priority, and a set of actions that we've set out to help enable that. So I'm going to do the next slide, please, routine as well, to avoid getting too stuck with this controller here. So if we can, go on to the next slide after that. Brilliant. So I think I'm probably preaching to the converted here, but certainly the analysis that we have as government shows that short duration flexibility, which includes short duration battery storage, has a massive role to play in reducing the costs of the GB electricity system. And this chart shows that by 2050, that would be 10 billion per year saving. I mean, it's worth remembering that, as well as perhaps the more obvious point that electricity storage is absolutely essential to enable that massive increase in renewables, which is also part, and probably the central part, of the Clean Power Action Plan. But it's also really good for system costs and ultimately consumer bills. Next slide, please. So, as I'll cover a bit later in the presentation, we've been particularly active recently on what we call long duration electricity storage. And I'll go into this in a bit more detail later, as I say, but it includes sort of mature technology such as pumped storage hydro, liquid air energy storage, and some of the other technologies that Roger mentioned. But the differentiator between perhaps the batteries that we're most familiar with today is obviously the duration aspect. So we're talking about several hours plus. Modelling that we've done on this shows that you can get further massive cost reductions from having more of this online. We've historically got very little in GB if you compare us to other European countries such as France, Spain, Italy, and we want a lot more. And again, this is to help balance the system, including in those more longer sustained periods of low wind and low sun. But the chart here, I think, shows just what system savings are available in the process. Next slide, please. So starting with the current battery sector, which, as we hear, is mostly lithium-ion, and also focusing on that grid scale predominantly. The Clean Power Action Plan set out a capacity range to target of 23 to 27 gigawatts in GB by 2030, which is a 5 to 6-fold increase from the 4.5 gigawatts we have today. So that truly is massive scaling. Although if you look at the results of how batteries are faring in capacity market auctions, then I think you can, it would look that we're already quite well on track for this already, but it obviously involves all of you in this room and the things you'll be talking about later today to make that truly happen. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we set out in the Clean Power Action Plan to help enable this to happen are summarised on this slide, and I won't go into all of them, but I see that many of the sessions at this summit will be talking through, I think, all of these things. A few that I would perhaps highlight: grid connection reform, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, not necessarily always in a good way, but clearly at a high level, there has been a huge queue to get a grid connection, and the government, working with Ofgem and our system operator NESO, is clearly in the middle of reforming that so that the mature projects can deliver early, and the more speculative ones are, if they can't deliver on time, are kind of taken out from the front of the queue. That is clearly a big reform, and there are obviously going to be pain points involved, and I look forward to hearing more about others' thoughts on this later today, but it's clearly essential if we're actually going to get stuff built, which is a key theme of this government. Other things I'd mention here, which have been touched upon already, market access, as we heard from Brent. A lot of the markets have been designed for gas or coal, so making sure that they are offering appropriate and fair access to the newer technologies such as battery storage. For example, the balancing mechanism, which we use in GB, where we have a commitment from NESO to make further progress on that. Supply chains, I'm sure we'll hear a lot about today as well, transformers and switchgear, etc. There's a commitment for the department to help with that, in particular the Clean Power Unit that's headed by Chris Stark, who many of you will know. And finally, we committed to publishing later this year a flexibility roadmap to focus on flexibility in its entirety and get to a sort of a lower level of detail in some of the things we need to work with you to address. So next slide, please. So we've also heard a little bit about longer duration electricity storage, and I've said why this is also essential. Although the scaling up of the longer duration storage, electricity storage, is less extreme on the face of it compared to batteries, we do have very high ambitions here, as I say, and I think a lot of the capacity is probably more likely to come online in the sort of early 2030s, given the long lead times. But we're, as you can see from this slide, looking to get that started and getting some more delivered by 2030 after 40 years of not building any new LDES in this country, which is remarkable. So final slide, please. And again, like with batteries, we set out a number of actions in the Clean Power Action Plan to help achieve more LDES investment. The biggest one, which me and my team have certainly been working on very busily with our colleagues in the regulator Ofgem over the last few months, and that will continue to be the case this year, is introducing a cap and floor investment support scheme for LDES to build on the great achievements actually in building more electricity interconnection through a cap and floor support scheme over the last decade. And the challenges of both technologies have been similar actually. They're both very dependent on long-term market revenues over long lifespans of the assets. They're capex heavy, and the lead times for building these can be very large. So we think that it's absolutely right that we bring the investment support that we've had for electricity interconnectors to LDES assets as well, and there's been lots of support in this country to do so. And Ofgem expects to be able to open the first application round for projects to apply for that support in Q2 of this year. We've also got the National Wealth Fund, which is supporting 2 LDES projects already. We've got a history of funding innovation in this space. Again, many of the technologies that Roger and others have mentioned already. And as you can see, there are a number of other aspects of this as well. And I'll be taking notes throughout the whole day for other areas we need to address in the flexibility roadmap. So I'm going to hold it there. Thank you very much for your time. And I really look forward to hearing more from the other sessions today and meeting some of you in the breaks. So I'll hand over to Roger.